Hey guys. Hey Sam, what's up, man? Welcome, welcome. Okay, everybody's here. Howdy, howdy. Okay, guys, welcome. I'm so glad that you're all here. Today, I just want to share you some of the stuff that we'll be talking about in the challenge. And if someone can let me know that you can hear me, see me okay. Hope you can see me okay. But I want to tell you guys about kind of three big ideas. And the first idea is internal family systems theory. The idea that you are not just an individuality, you are a multiplicity, and that's why we have these different voices in our heads. There are different parts of us, and we can actually engage with these different parts in conversation so that we can live in a way that's less polarized. And the second idea, although I'll probably talk about it first, is family systems. Family systems is a theory that recognizes that when we only focus on the individual, isolating them from a broader context, we are missing what's happening within them. And family system postulates that oftentimes when we have a hyper focus on the individual and their symptoms or the emotional difficulties that they're having, we miss what's actually going on. Because oftentimes individuals that are very emotionally sensitive, who manifest symptoms of anxiety and depression, what is really happening is that they are manifesting these symptoms emotionally of a much broader systemic dysfunction. So we're going to talk about internal family systems, how we come to internalize these voices, the different parts of us. We're going to talk about external family systems, the environment that we grow up in, how it affects us, some of the rules and ways that those external family systems operate. And all of this is going to be hinged on an idea of family systems called differentiation of self. And differentiation of self is the core concept that's really rooted my understanding of the person. Differentiation of self is our ability. It's the task of every child and the goal of every family. And I'll just say this here at the beginning. I'm not going to say it a whole lot. But the hope here and what I'm going to be sharing, this is a little piece of what I'll be sharing in the challenge. So I would love to work with you one-on-one to help you to be less reactive this holiday season as the holidays are approaching. And we do that in a 5-step plan. So there's a comment there. If you send me a DM that says challenge, I'll send you a link. But really what this is, I want to kind of actually teach you and guys, give you guys a feel for what we'll be talking about. These are some of my favorite theories, so I'm really excited to be talking about them. We'll do this for about 10 minutes. And then I'll take about 5 minutes of questions, and then we'll wrap up. So differentiation of self is a theory, a concept that's developed by Murray Bowen. Murray Bowen was a systems thinker, and the central idea in systems thinking is that when you affect one part of the system, the system as a whole is affected at large. So you see this all across with the environmental awareness right now, and this is really where it was emerging. When you put a dam in a river, it doesn't just stop the water, right? It stops the fish. And when the fish aren't able to get upstream, it affects the bears. And when the bears are affected, the whole ecosystem shifts. And so Murray Bowen and other theorists as well, but we'll focus on Bowenian family systems, took this idea of systems theory and applied it to the family and recognized that psychology up until then, I think this is probably around the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, it was really popularized. Recognizing that in our culture, in the American culture at least, the culture of the West, we overemphasize the individual because this is what the scientific method is all about. The scientific method is all about eliminating variables so that we can understand how does this variable affect that variable. And it's really helpful in experiments, but it's not a helpful way to understand complex systems. It's a helpful way to understand how one variable affects another variable. But when we think like that, we negate the fact that there's many more variables than this. And so Murray Bowen developed an idea called differentiation of self. And he said that the core to maturity, the goal of the family, was to help the individual to differentiate. And that means that the individual is able to be connected to other people while also being connected to themselves. He postulated that as humans, we have two different dimensions. a dimension of autonomy and individuality, and a dimension of togetherness or unity in relationship. And he says that when we are developing in family systems that are highly emotionally charged, we as vulnerable young children don't have the opportunity to protect ourselves. And so we take on that anxiety and then react from it. And we develop in two ways. We typically either polarize towards individuality. This is somebody who kind of has an identity as a rebel, whose whole identity is in being unique. Or we polarize towards togetherness. And this is the classic experience of being a people pleaser, of being so emotionally sensitive that the wants and the needs of other people really strongly affect us and throw us off of our balance. Murray Bowen said that the goal of the family system is to help the child to be able to say, I am both an individual and I am part of this family without having to sacrifice one for the other. And so this really goes hand in hand with mindfulness. Mindfulness is the practice of non-reactivity, of learning to observe our internal experiences rather than just living out and being driven by them. And so in his family systems theory, he started to study families and recognized that in families with children who manifested symptoms, oftentimes the families had really rigid roles, right? So that might look like really rigid rules. Now these rules of the family, they're not written out, they're not spoken, but it might be something like we don't express anger. It might be something like you never question mom and dad. It might be something like we don't talk about problems. A rule might be something like you have to present a good image to the external world. And so while adults can kind of navigate around this, the young child is just vulnerable to being taken over by that emotion. And so family systems theory finds that in emotionally reactive families, certain members of the family take on roles that are kind of assigned to them by the imbalance. Because if you think about a car, if there's a flat tire on one part of the car, the whole other car is going to be affected. The axles are going to experience tension, the other tire is going to take more tension, and this is what it's like for a child. In a family, if there's tension between mom and dad, right, the child is going to bear the brunt of it, and this is what's called triangulation. Murray Bowen says that when there's an unstable relationship between two people, and the most common way this happens in families is between mom and dad, when there's an unstable tension between mom and dad, what happens is one member will often pull in a third, creating a triangle. So mom is having a hard time with dad, and she starts talking to the son, saying, oh, dad's doing this, dad's doing that. That creates a triangle, which creates an emotional stability of the system at the expense of the child. Because then the child is taking on all the stress and the anxiety of mom and dad's role. The child then all of a sudden feels a responsibility to keep mom together or to keep the peace, to keep the marriage together. And so then the child gets forced into this role of caretaker, mediator, therapist. This is a lot of therapists, a lot of us therapists have gotten pushed into this role. And so we've learned how to kind of navigate helping people out. And so this is the general idea of family systems theory. And Murray Bowen says that we have to look at the family system of what does each role do, and how can we kind of balance it more? How can we help people to be less emotionally reactive? And how can we help people to notice what other people are saying and thinking and feeling, but not be driven by them? So again, differentiation of self, this is the key. It's our ability to be connected to other people without reacting. And Murray Bowen said, let me just silence my phone here. In that situation of the triangle, what happens is the child is drawn into an emotionally charged relationship. The child doesn't have any other option but to react because it's so volatile and the child is vulnerable. The child can't say no. And so then the child just is indoctrinated into emotional reactivity. And when mom says something, when dad says something, the child rushes to try to help it. There's other roles too. You could be the scapegoat, and this happens a lot of times. There's one child that manifests symptoms, and it's like, well, that's the child's fault. The problem child, the golden child, the perfect child, the favorite, the smart one. We get pegged into these narrow roles because of the imbalance of the system. Because the feelings are being felt that aren't being talked about. And where this ties in with internal family systems, and this is a theory that's developed by Dick Schwartz. Dick Schwartz says that just like there's an external family system, and what one person does affects the other person, and there can have rigid roles, especially in times of tension, Dick Schwartz says that we also have an internal family system. He says it's not very helpful when we think about the individual person as just one individual entity psychologically. Because he says, think about your own experience. You have many different voices in your head, and yet we treat ourselves like we're just this one kind of being. And the image that I like to think of here is almost like an arrow, right? Especially in the West, we think of the person as like this arrow that should be pointed in one direction. And if we feel conflict, we think it's a problem. Your conflict isn't a problem. It's just because you're human. He says this myth of the mono mind, this single psychological entity, is driving us crazy. Because the reality is, you have certain parts of you that want to do one thing and another part of us that wants to do another, right? I have a part of me that wants to drive to Pittsburgh right now and eat an all-you-can-eat sushi buffet, and I would love to drop everything, right? We can have parts of us that want to go to a concert but also want to go to a friend's event. Parts of us that can feel guilty but also excited. And so this experience of internal conflict, it's not because something's wrong with you. It's because our culture at large doesn't have a sophisticated enough understanding that you are not just an individual self, you are a self system of interconnected, interworking psychological parts, right? You have parts of you that know how to show up at work. You have parts of you that know how to relax. You have parts of you that have really funny jokes. You have parts of you that know how to tune in and be reverent. So this complexity, allowing ourselves to have complexity, has been one of the most powerful theories that I've found in my work. And it's actually the type of therapy, not only that I practice, I use it a lot in my practice, but it's also the type of therapy that I do when I go to my therapist. I go to an IFS therapist. And so Dick Schwartz says there's 3 different types of parts that we have. We have exile parts. And these are parts of us that when we're young and we get hurt, they get stuck with all the pain, right? So one of the rules of thumb here is the bigger the emotional reaction, the younger you were when you first experienced that pain. And that's because we experience really painful things and then we push that away because it's so threatening. And if we don't have adults to help us process it, we push those painful experiences away. And then they just get shoved in this young part of us that's like 4, 5, 8, 10. It's like a 10-year-old part of us that's just stuck with all the sadness, all the rejection, all the hurt. He says then there's another part of us that takes on the role of what's called the manager. And the job of the managers is to keep anxiety away. So these are the parts of us that can have perfectionistic standards, the interior critic, the voice, the role. Megan, if you send me a DM challenge, if you DM me the message, not a comment, to my account, I'll send you the link. These parts of us, these critical voices, the job of the critic is actually to protect us from criticism. And Dick Schwartz says that every single part of us is good. Every part of us has an underlying good intention. They're trying to take care of us. And this is really important. We have to understand that these parts have good intentions. It doesn't mean that their execution is helpful. But these are adaptive skills that we learned that helped us get through a situation once that now we might not need anymore. But the way the critic protects us oftentimes is the critic says, well, if you exist in an environment where you show vulnerability and you're going to get criticized from the outside, the interior critic says, I'm going to take on the job of criticizing you so that you don't say or do something vulnerable and get criticized from them. So the interior critic, even though we feel like it's this harsh voice, we can actually learn to turn towards that critic, listen to what it's saying, listen to how it got stuck with that job. And each of our parts has a burden, right? So the interior critic's burden is this extreme, rigid role of negativity. When our parts are burdened, they're not able to share their natural resourceful qualities with us. And so the work in IFS is coming to learn how to conversate with the parts, how to talk to the parts. If you DM me the word guide, I'll send you a 6-step guide that lays out the steps for talking to a part. And I like to use this through journaling. I'll talk about that a little bit more in another place, but we'll stay with the theory here. So we have exiles, and exiles are the young parts of us that their burden is they get stuck with all the painful emotions that come up. They get pushed away. And then managers are the parts of us that keep the pain away. So the manager's job is to keep the painful feelings of shame or embarrassment or fear. Tracy, if you send me a DM, I'll send it to you. You have to send it to my account, not just on the live. So DM me after the call. But if you, these vulnerable young parts of us hold all the pain. The manager's job is to manage. They run the day-to-day operations. And then there's a third part that Dick Schwartz talks about. The third part of the internal family system is the firefighter. And firefighters are exactly what they sound like. They are the emergency responders that when the shame or the pain or the sadness of the exiles breaks through to consciousness, the firefighters rush in, and they do not care about the damage they do. All they care is getting your consciousness away from the pain. They're trying to protect us, but this is why, because they don't really care how it happens, they can do this in really extreme ways. So these are the examples of binging, purging, addictions, substances, addictions to sexual addictions, addictions to our phone, numbing, cutting, all these really extreme ways. Those firefighters are trying to say, oh, I'm just trying to get you away from that pain. And so they come in, and then the very difficult part of this is afterwards, the firefighters do their job, they kind of dissociate. Say something about India. I like India. I was in Calcutta once, Manshi. The firefighters come in, they dissociate, and then what happens is the managers emerge again, and then the managers feel even more shame, so they try to keep the exiles even further away, and it's just this vicious cycle. So these parts of us, just like the external family system, these parts of us get forced into extreme roles. And when one part of us gets hurt, the other parts of us kind of have to, counterbalance that. This is why it's really easy to feel like, I don't know what came over me. I feel like I was just in a trance. I feel like I was just overwhelmed. Why we have these flashbacks, because these are parts of us that are still stuck in those moments. And so if you want a guide on how to talk to these parts, just send me a message. I'll send you a guide. Send me a message after the call. But the beauty here is that when we understand that we're operating not just as this one individual entity, but as a self-system, we can understand that this system makes sense. You make sense. You're not crazy. As Viktor Frankl said, the normal experience to an abnormal situation is abnormal behavior. The extreme feelings you have, you're not crazy. You just haven't learned how to process them. And this is one of the reasons why we can get so easily triggered by something that it feels like it doesn't make sense. It does make sense, because these young parts of us are triggered by similar experience that first initiated that painful experience in the first place. So in IFS, what we do is we become aware of our internal system, of these different parts of us, and then we learn to develop self-leadership. And this is the hinge. It's differentiation of self. Right? We're learning to be non-reactive. So just like in the family system, we help the family system by becoming non-reactive. In the internal system, we help that by becoming less reactive as well. And so this is where I like the practice of mindfulness, because mindfulness is that practice where we learn to be less emotionally reactive and driven, and able to observe our intense emotional space without caving them. So that's kind of a little bit of a primer here on IFS, on family systems, on differentiation. So I'll close with differentiation. As I'm closing here, I really want to invite you guys to ask your questions related to things that we're talking about here. So please ask questions. I would love to talk more with you about this. We'll do this for about 5 minutes and then we'll wrap up. But differentiation of self is the ability to be connected with other people without being disconnected to ourselves. This also means that differentiation of the self is the ability for me to be connected with these parts of me that hold really big and heavy emotions without blending and getting swept away by the emotion. This is the practice of mindfulness. In mindfulness, we learn to recognize that I'm not the thoughts and the feelings that go by. Those are like clouds in the sky. I am the sky. I am the context. I am the space in which all this experience emerges. So differentiation of self is the goal of our work in this challenge. This is a 5-day challenge, and we are going to be working on helping you to create a plan to be more aware, to know what situations are going to come up, to understand your internal system, to understand how it developed in response to your external system, to learn how to regulate and connect with yourself when you're getting overwhelmed, to learn what conversations and difficult situations you can expect, because that's one of the things with family systems, is they're predictable. You know the conversations you're going to fall back into. And to have a script, to have a guide, to know how to respond assertively without getting caught in reactivity. So this is what our 5-day challenge is about. It's a 5-day journaling challenge. I'm really excited about it. And I would love to see you guys there. So please, let me know the questions that you guys have about internal family systems theory. And we'll explore those here. So we have a question here. How can you work on your inner critic with love? Obviously, it's trying to look out for you, but you're sick of her. Yeah. So here what we would say is, Prickle Bones, there's actually 2 different parts of you. There's a part of you that's the inner critic. That's one manager. And you're experiencing what's called a polarization. And a polarization happens when we have an inner critic and then another part of us gets sick of how that inner critic hurts us and develops. And this is just a power struggle, because this is what happens in families. We get locked into these grid-locked positions. And so the key here is actually to learn to slow down. So if you send me a message after this in a DM, I'll send you a journaling guide that can help you kind of work with both of these parts. But essentially what you need to say is, and this is what we do in a family system, you say, pause. We can't both talk at the same time. The inner critic can't talk at the same time that the part that hates the inner critic is talking. We need to take turns and listen to each. And then you work to negotiate between both. And it's actually remarkably effective, but you have to slow the conversation down. As long as both of those parts are wrestling with each other, you're going to stay in this gridlock position. How do you stop negative self-talk when you feel bad? Can you ask this question again? I stick around. How do you stop negative self-talk when you feel bad, when you've been negative to others? Forgiveness. I have to forgive myself. So this has happened actually quite recently for me. I've been doing a lot of hard work and been a bit stressed. And so I've actually been really defensive towards my wife. And I've had a lot of overreactions. And what I've learned to do is just simply go to her and say, like, hey, I'm sorry. The first thing that we have to do is forgive ourselves. Right? Say, hey, JP, that wasn't cool. I didn't like that. I'm not about that. That was an overreaction. I'm going to recognize that behavior is unacceptable while also forgiving myself. So I'm not going to get caught in this shame spiral. So I'm going to give myself permission to have made a mistake while also acknowledging that it was a mistake and taking accountability for it. And then I'm going to go apologize. So I've just learned really to apologize is one of the best ways that I've learned to respond when I've said stuff that I don't like. But it begins by allowing myself to realize, like, yeah, I don't like that I said that. And then saying that to the other person with sincerity. How can you identify all the parts? This is just practice. So this is one of the reasons why I like journaling. One of the good ways, and this is important too. There are 3 types of parts, but we have many parts, right? We don't just have 3 parts. We also have what's called the self. I can't believe I forgot to say this. The self is that seat of consciousness. The self is the you that's not a part. The self is your awareness itself. And so we're learning to step our awareness back from the parts in their reactivity. This is what happens when we practice mindfulness meditation. If you need some meditations, check out my YouTube channel. This is what happens when we journal, when we work with these parts in this 6-step guide. So the 6 steps are to find the part, to kind of notice where does it need attention, to focus on it, notice how it's showing up in my body, to flesh it out, to see in greater detail how this part, whether it's a voice, whether it's a feeling, because these parts are stuck and stored in our bodies. And then we feel towards the part, we notice what's our attitude, we cultivate this sense of curiosity, openness, and genuine interest, and then we befriend the part. We get to know how did it get this job? How did it get stuck here? And then finally, we ask this part, what are you afraid would happen if you stopped doing your job? So that's one of the things that we do there in terms of identifying our parts. So great, guys. Well, this has been really good. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it. I really like doing these Is the link for your YouTube in your bio? It is. Yes, the link for my YouTube is in my bio. So please, if you all, there's two resources here. If you're interested in doing this challenge with me, I would love to see you there. Because intention isn't enough. We can all say, oh, I want to do things differently this year around my family. But intention is not enough. When I was doing research on automaticity, what I found in the research is that when we set intention consciously, it gets overridden by the environment that we're in. Because environment is a greater predictor of our behavior than our intention. This is why a plan is important. Because when we create a plan, we're taking into account the environment around us and choosing intentionally how am I going to respond not just to the situation, but to the environment itself. So that's what this holiday resilience challenge is. It's a 5-day challenge where we're going to use journal prompts. I'm going to be walking with you, helping you to identify the stuck spots, helping you to understand yourself, helping you to understand your reactions, and I'm going to be walking with you. So I'll be sending messages. You need action. That's right, Pearson. I'm going to be walking with you. I'm going to be doing this challenge with you. There's journal prompts each day to help you gain awareness of the system. There's guides to help you understand how to work with these parts. And we are going to be helping you not just to get caught up in the same old pattern, but to actually have a 5-step plan. Like you're going to literally have a written out plan. So you know, these are the patterns I get stuck in. These are the common patterns in my family. These are the conversations that I know are going to come up. Here's how I'm going to respond in a differentiated way, a non-reactive way. And here's how I can step into a new role. And so we're going to do that. I'm going to do that with you all through journaling. And so if you would like to join me, I would love for you to join me. I would love to work one-on-one with you. I'm going to be in the group chats. I'm going to be sending you guys message. There's a community aspect to this as well. I'd love to help you make this plan because it's really part of this is that it's something that I found, right? My experience over and over again. I was like, I'm going to do different. Or I learn all this stuff in psychology. I learn all this stuff in therapy. And it's so easy for me to just step through those doors and turn into a 14-year-old again. The same reaction, the same overreaction. So that's why I'm creating this plan because it's a resource that I wish I had. It's a resource I wish my clients had. It's a resource that I want you to have. So that's what this is all about. So if you're interested, please come join me. I would love to help you. You can DM me after this live. You can DM me the word challenge, and I will send you a link to the challenge. And then if you're interested in that 6-step guide, the guide for journaling, for how to talk to our parts, just send me the word guide, DM me the word guide, and I would love to share it with you. So thank you all for being here, and I hope you take good care.